Hello, this is Ben Geisler coming at you. This is the game that we are about to make. As you can see, it's a shooter game. I'm blowing up these little kind of hot air balloon type things. I guess you could call it steampunk or something. I've got a health value here. When I hit these, I lose health. Notice that the ship itself is animating. And I can also shoot ships, and I can destroy those ships, and that gives me points. And my score goes down as soon as I start hitting things, and if I die. So that is that. That's what we're going to start making. The first thing we got to do is we got to talk about our design process, and our design process is going to be guided by a flowchart that we've got created here. The design process of a game is very important because basically that helps guide you through the entire process, from knowing what kind of animations you need, knowing what kind of assets you need, knowing how to schedule out the entire program. So, questions to ask yourself as we continue the game design is, what kind of a game is it? What are the objectives? What is the player trying to do? How does the main menu look? What are the main objects in the game? All of these things are things that we need to take care of in the flowchart. This is a really simple game, so we're doing that with a flowchart. It starts with just the basic idea of the creation of this is basically that you're checking for input. After you're done checking for input, you're going to process that input, update the ship's velocity, and update the ship's position. So we want to be able to move up and down on the screen as we go along in our space shooter. We also want to be able to fire bullets, and these bullets should have an initiate function. This is the initiate method that's called, and then we should play some shooting sound effects eventually. Also, not to forget, but we want there to be a main menu to our game. So the main menu is going to have a play feature and an exit feature. When you hit play, the game will start up, it'll load the ship and everything, and then it'll immediately start checking for input and being able to fire bullets. We also have a main menu feature where we're going to play some main menu music. We're going to be able to highlight selected options, and then we can launch the game from there. Eventually we're going to code for collisions as well, so we need a design for that. We're going to basically say, okay, first off, check for input, then fire bullets, then check for collision. This is kind of a typical walkthrough of a sort of like a typical game loop, where you've basically got something like input processing, usually followed by logic processing, followed by physics, and then finally rendering. And this kind of mimics that. You see that we've got the check input stage here, that's the input processing. Logic processing is sort of the fire bullet. Physics is kind of the check for collisions, and rendering is the draw. So we want to be able to check for collisions, and that includes colliding with the enemy, as well as bullets colliding with the enemy and having those enemies explode. If I collide with an enemy, I want it to be game over. Of course, I showed you an updated version that actually included health. Inside the draw, I want to be able to draw the background, the active enemies, the player, the active bullets, and the player score. So that's basically our game. It's just a standard shoot 'em up, as they're called. That will be sort of what our game looks like, is just a 2D shooter. And in that shooter, we're going to be able to go back and forth, up and down. We're going to be able to shoot enemies, and basically just a standard shooter. From here on out, we will start the creation of our game now that we've got a game design flowchart, and we'll start the creation of our game. However, one of your assignments this week is going to be to create a new design doc or a flowchart, one or the other, either a design doc in the template format that I gave you before, or a flowchart in this format that enhances the game in some way. This is the entire game that we're going to create in the next 2 weeks. However, your project is going to be to take this game and add new things to it. For example, enemies that fire, the player going back and forth, because as you could see in our game right now, the player has some limited movement in the forward direction, but what if we want sort of speed boost, for example? So we want him to go forward very quickly, backward very quickly, that kind of thing. That might be something you add. You might want to add boss monsters, for example, or at least one boss monster, which would be like a big ship kind of going up and down, and you need to destroy it in order to proceed. You might add new levels, new backgrounds, new enemies, huge variety of things. If you need inspiration, my favorite particular shoot 'em up is R-Type. I think R-Type is a excellent first-person shooter. It tends to be kind of hard, but it's a very great game if you can find it's a side-scrolling shoot 'em up arcade game produced back in 1987. But that's kind of what we're making here. You know, we went from text-based adventure games all the way up to now we're kind of doing side-scroller shoot 'em ups, and you can kind of see some of the gameplay here. It's a really fun game, but you can kind of get inspired if you watch some of these shoot 'em ups. For example, this game here include an ability to have a power-up. You can see that playing right now, where it's sort of powering up the cannon, and once he releases that, he'll release a superpowered charge. So he's going to do that here against that guy. So that's a supercharged thing. He's got a shield that he's attached to his unit right here, and that shield can be launched off independently to shoot other enemies. So I want you to look at, you know, shoot 'em ups like this, and other types of shoot 'em ups, and use that as sort of inspiration for you to decide what kind of a game you'd want to make out of this shooter. Again, your project is going to be to make a shooter, but we're going to guide you through the early steps and basically get you to the stage where you are creating a shooter that's very simple, such as what I just showed you. So you're going to have all of this within a couple weeks. Today we're going to get as far as collisions in the next remaining videos. So just check that out for the next video. And in the meantime, start thinking about what kind of enhancements you want to make to your existing shooter.